Evening. We are going to proceed. Mr. Truss, good evening.
Hi, good evening. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. And yourself?
Beautiful. I'm doing well.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I am Sandy Octave Joseph, the Membership and Event Coordinator of St. Lucia, and I will be your moderator for this session. We're diving into Module 2, Protected Structures, focusing on the introduction of greenhouses with Mr. Maki Truss. Mr. Truss was born in Zitland, Greenland, Nevis, pursued education in mechanical engineering and later in electronics and technology at DeVry Institute in Canada. After working as a biomedical engineer, he returned to St. Kitts Nevis in 2000, managing Mac Penny's computers and later founding A1 Office Technology Limited. Mr. Truss developed a passion for farming, influenced by his father, and established 4 greenhouses in Nevis, growing various crops. He has contributed significantly to his community, serving in roles such as biomed at Alexandra Hospital, on the board of Nevis Cooperative Credit Union, and as a chairperson for the Nevis Electricity Company. He has lectured on sustainable agriculture and is currently a consultant for the FAO on the WEF Nexus project. Mr. Truss is also a director of the National Caribbean Insurance and actively shares his expertise in agriculture and business. Mr. Truss brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in many different disciplines. Before we begin, some housekeeping rules. Please keep your mics muted. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to raise your hand or you can write them in the chat. Thank you, ladies. Mr. Truss, you could begin.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good evening, all. I see that we've got 105 participants. I just want to welcome all of you to this evening's session. We should be in this space for about 2 hours. The first session would be the lecture and presentation session, after which we should be able to get into questions and answers and what I would call the real conversation as it relates to greenhouse farming. Now, just for my own personal knowledge, Madam Moderator, do we have people from St. Kitts Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent? What is the demographics that we're dealing with tonight?
Yes, we have all 3 countries present.
Oh, beautiful. So I'm extending my sisterhood, really, because what I need for you to realize is that I am from a large family. I've got 9 sisters, and so tonight I'm adding another 110. So we should have a good time tonight. Now, if I may, I would share my screen and pull up the presentation. Okay, are we seeing my screen?
No.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Sorry.
Let me minimize that. Share. Is this better?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes, thank you.
no problem at all. Little technical difficulties, but that's how it will be at times. So once again, good evening. My name is Mackie Truss, residing now in Nevis. And like was said before, I wore a few hats over my lifetime. Now, I must put this disclaimer in that I'm not trained as an agriculturist, but I have a passion for agriculture and have been working in agriculture since 2010, when my son brought home an agricultural project. It was tray of 72 seedlings, and we had to nurture them from planting stage, which was about 3 weeks, onto maturity, and document each stage. Now, that quickly became a family project because, as a matter of fact, the initial project was about 3 or 4 seedlings. But my wife decided to go to agriculture, and she brought home a whole tray of 72 seedlings. And she, being from town, really didn't understand that these seedlings have to have proper spacing and so on. So having said all of that, I then ventured and had to mark out a space in the yard, maybe 20 by 30. And that space is still in front of me as we speak. And we set about planting the seedlings, nurturing them, and shortly that turned into a family project. Now, that turned out so well that we had more tomatoes from that 172 tray that we could find family members and friends to give. I had and still have a storefront in town where I run A1 office, and that store really is computer and electronics driven. And so I was hesitant at first, but my wife keep pushing. Trust, we have to sell these tomatoes, is just too much for us and families. And so she decided that I would take the small 3-foot table, take it down to the store, gave me a nice tablecloth, and we put 5 tomatoes in a bag, and we sold them for $25. Sorry, we sold them for $5. There were 25 packages, but by lunchtime when I picked her up, she asked me, how did it go? I said, well, listen, it went so well that we don't even, there's not even 1 bag left. She said, you see what I told you? Listen to your wife, you could have been doing this since last week. And the passion just grew from there, and from that 1 tray, we started with some lettuce, we added cabbage, we added herbs, and we lived on a large plot of land. It's almost an acre. And in a year or 2, we were looking for space. And so the progression goes. What we realized after that was that the supermarkets and the general public, and even the hotels and restaurants, were now interested in the produce. And during the summertime, we were having a hard time keeping up with the demand of producing vegetables. So I remember my days in Canada where they had greenhouses and they were producing ketchup. And well, the greenhouses were growing the tomatoes to feed the Heinz ketchup plant that produced ketchup. And this was being done all year round. And so I remember that and started doing some research into greenhouse production, because I figured that if it could work there in the cold, it could definitely work here in the heat as well. And so that's when my interest in farming turned to the technological aspect of it. And so I zeroed in on the greenhouse technology. We were able to build the first greenhouse in 2012 and commission it in January 2013. In 2015, we built the second greenhouse. In 2017, built the third one. And in during COVID, we built the 4th greenhouse. So we have 4 greenhouses now at A1 Farms Nevis, and we grow a variety of crops. So that's just a little bit of background on how we really started with the greenhouse farming. I just want to let you know that we still do outdoor farming as well, because there's not everything that you could grow in the greenhouse. Seasoned pepper, pumpkin, bananas, plantain, eggplants, papayas. We still do that on the outdoors. So just a little bit of background so that we know what we're talking and you can get a little comfortable. I'm sure some of you have similar stories, but we'll get to that maybe in the discussion. All right, so we shall dive into it and get started. Those of you who thought that was my introduction, yes, that was my personal introduction, but the introduction to greenhouse and greenhouse technology begins now. So due to the change in the climatic conditions in the last century, and more specifically in the last 30 years, farmers have been forced to find alternative ways to ply their trade. Climate change is the warming of the Earth's crust, and it has resulted in longer periods of droughts, heavy rainfalls, heat waves, and extreme weather conditions such as hurricanes. I'm sure that everyone here in this space could relate to the longer drought periods and the heat waves that we're currently having up to today in the region. So to mitigate against these adverse conditions, farmers have looked at the use of technology for solutions. Sorry? Somebody's mic is on mute there. So today we would explore the use of the greenhouse technology as one of the ways to combat climate change. And when we say greenhouse technology, I would use this term very loosely throughout the presentation because greenhouse, shade house, protected structures, all would fall under protected agriculture. And so if I say greenhouses, I'm referring to shade houses as well. Now, the main difference here is that the greenhouse doesn't allow any rain in, whereas the shade house, you would get some kind of seepage. So usually the greenhouse, the roof is made of a plastic material or some kind of polycarbonate material that doesn't allow any rain into the greenhouse. So for this purpose, we're going to stick with that definition. I've jotted down some learning objectives just to give us a guide of what we're going to cover tonight. And we're going to look at simple definition of a greenhouse, get into how does it work, why we consider greenhouse technology to be essential, the components of the greenhouse, meaning what makes up the greenhouse. Some greenhouses are classified by structure, some are classified by materials. We're going to look at the benefits of using greenhouses, common greenhouse plants. By that I mean plants that are more often used in the greenhouse environment. We're going to look at the advantages of greenhouse and, pros and cons as well. So advantages and disadvantages. When we ask, what is a greenhouse? Well, simply put, greenhouses are buildings designed to grow plants in a controlled environment. It protects plants from extreme weather conditions and mitigate against pests and diseases. Most of these greenhouses are framed and they're covered with plastic and netting, or plastic alone or netting alone. And these are capable of withstanding strong winds and heavy rainfalls. Like I mentioned before, it controls the environmental condition for plants, prevents the entry of insects and pests, regulates sunlight, and minimize water usage, protect the plant from strong winds and rain, and protect the plant from too much heat caused by solar radiation. That we would expound on as we go on. In terms of how the greenhouse works, we would remember from our science in first, second form, the greenhouse effect, where the rays from the sun comes to Earth, hits the Earth in short wavelength, and turns some of that light into heat energy. And that is what really warms up the Earth. It does the same in the greenhouse environment, except on the outdoors, when the wavelength hit the Earth and turn into radiation, it leaves the Earth with longer wavelength and go back into the atmosphere. In the greenhouse environment now, what happens is that most of that heat energy is trapped because it doesn't escape through the plastic or through the roof as it would vent easily as easily as if the plastic wasn't there. So that creates the greenhouse effect. So usually the roof is covered with plastic. In North America and in Europe and so on, I've seen where the houses are covered with glass or some kind of polyethylene material. But those get pretty expensive. And I've seen the full glass houses as well. Those we would look at a little bit later, but they really don't apply to us in the tropics. So this material is usually the covering for the roof, and the sides are usually made of transparent and translucent material. And that really allows light to go into the greenhouse. And once there's light, there's some form of radiation coming from it. So as the radiation enters, infrared heat is emitted in the greenhouse. As this cannot pass to the roof, it remains trapped inside, providing a source of heat and allows plants to perform photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is really the method by which plants make their food. Therefore, it is possible to maintain a favorable temperature and moisture inside the greenhouse. Now, what we realize is that over time, some of these greenhouses have to be altered just so that the temperature inside is comfortable for the plants. So in our environment in the region, we have a lot of natural venting. But with these extended heat waves, sometimes we need to do what we call forced ventilation, with the introduction of fans or wet walls or something to just move the air along, so that there's more airflow, there's heat exchange and so on. This slide really is a simplified version of the science behind the greenhouse, where like I was explaining before, the light from the sun comes in, short wavelength, hit the ground, converted to infrared rays where the heat comes, and then the warm air is expelled from the greenhouse with longer wavelength, but because of the plastic and the glass environment, most of that is trapped inside and warms up the greenhouse. So that's basically in a nutshell, in its simplified form, where the science behind the greenhouse works. If we remember our science from first, second form, we remember that if we were not getting infrared rays, then the temperature on Earth would be like minus 15 degrees, because it's the rays from the sun that really heats up the tropics. So if one takes himself or herself to North America and realize in the wintertime there's hardly any sun, and so the temperature is very, very low. And that is a simplified version of the greenhouse and how the technology works when it comes to the greenhouse. Let's talk about the essential components of a greenhouse. We would have the frame, and the frame is then covered with glass polycarbonate, polyethylene, plastic, and netting. In our region, most of the greenhouses that you would come across would be plastic roofing and the side or side walls made of insect netting. That would be transparent. The plastic would be transparent as well. In recent times, the technology has improved so much that the plastic that covers the roof, it may look like construction plastic, but it has a lot more properties in it than it's totally different to construction plastic, although it looks similar. Some of these plastic are anti-dust, so they really don't attract dust on the plastic so as to prevent the sunlight from going through. They've developed an antithermic plastic now that diffuses light much more effectively than in previous years. And that antithermic plastic, I haven't had a chance to use it yet, but was in a forum early in the year where it had said that that plastic would be able, through the diffusion of light and the it prevents certain wavelengths from getting into the greenhouse as well. And this would in turn lower the temperature inside the greenhouse. So the greenhouse must have some kind of ventilation. It's important that the air is circulated, whether it would be by the natural trade winds, or we should have sides that are retractable or vent on top, because we know that hot air rises, and when the hot air gets to the top, if you have a vent to the top, the hot air would be able to escape. Sometimes, depends on your location, if it's not where you get a lot of wind movement, you would have to induce what we call forced ventilation and put in some fans just to move the air around so that the hot air could eventually escape. Now, cooling systems might be something that we would have to look at here in the tropics, because the extended heat wave and the reality of climate change is really getting close to home and is reaching home, as a matter of fact, because this year and last year, it has been very, very hot. In my greenhouses, I never really had heat problems before this year. Started creeping in last year, as a matter of fact, but this year has been worse. We have had extended periods of heat, and I was told by the weather experts that this heat that we're experiencing will take us right down into November. So let's be guided accordingly. Now, another aspect of the greenhouse is the irrigation system. Now, we're using two types of irrigation systems in the greenhouse here. We're using the drip irrigation system, and then we're using hydroponics. Hydroponics, for those of us who aren't familiar with hydroponics, remember going to school and they're telling you that plants need sunlight, water, soil, and air to grow. In today's technology, we know that it's a little bit different. Sunlight can be replaced by light. So let's stick to light. Water, that's fine. But hydroponics is the practice of growing plants without soil in a soilless medium, whether it's straight nutrients or it's in an inert substance where maybe coconut core, or it could be stones, it could be sand, but hydroponics is basically growing plants without soil in a soilless culture, whether it be solution or in some kind of inert material, right? So plants really don't need soil to grow. And those of us who are into flowers would realize that yes, sometimes we pass and we see a nice piece of flowers, maybe croton or rose or something like that. And if we take a cutting and we stick it in a jar with water, in a week or two, that cutting, especially for those of us who are into herbs and herbs. If you cut a mint stem and you stick it in water, just plain water, you would realize that in a week, 6 days, 7 days, 8 days, start to put roots. So I'm just expounding on that to say that yes, soil is not necessary for the growing of plants, and try to explain hydroponics while we were at it. So let's now look at the type of structures that we see here in the region. Now, the structure you see in the picture is sometimes referred to as a freestanding greenhouse. And freestanding meaning it's not adjoined to anything, another greenhouse or a building or anything like that. It stands on its own or standalone structure. These structures you can place anywhere once you have the space. Normally, a greenhouse could be designed, the standard greenhouse, let me put it this way, the standard greenhouse is about 30 feet wide by 100 feet long. And you have your side walls and your roof, and there's nothing inside. Inside is open, right? The roof is constructed in such a way that it supports itself basically on the side walls. So all you have inside is space for planting. So these
And what happened now?
freestanding greenhouse, sorry?
Everybody wish you had a CPJ everywhere with Massey have a Massey.
They cross over the tipping point.
All right, we need to mute the mics, please. Freestanding greenhouses are a popular choice for those who are
But when
looking
do you know that
to
we're
grow
backing
different
up the wrong
plants
tree?
and have the space to accommodate them.
That's right.
Hi, Mr. Truss, you're muted.
Sorry about that. What was the last thing you heard? Hello?
You were talking about the standard size of the greenhouse and the type of greenhouse by structure.
Okay, let's go back one then. Yeah, so I think we had finished with the freestanding greenhouse, right?
You were now talking about the I remember the sizes of the greenhouse, and then after that you muted.
All right, no problem. Sorry about that. So as I was saying, the freestanding greenhouses are very popular. As a matter of fact, the standard size is 30 by 100, but they can be customized for every 12 feet. So you starting at usually at 24 feet. So you would have something like 30 by 24, 30 by 36, 30 by 48. It's always 30 by something, unless you're constructing it yourself. I've done shade houses. The last one I did was for the Elizabeth Pemberton Primary School here in Nevis. and that was custom made. So we were able to control the width and the length. So that one was 20 by 30 because they really don't have a lot of space in that schoolyard. And that greenhouse was a donation from Helen's Daughters. So I just want to say kudos to Helen's Daughters and keep up the good work. And so you can customize the greenhouses even from the factory to whatever length you want, up to about 108 feet in length, but always 30 across. Sometimes when you go wider than 30, it's custom and the cost just goes through the roof. So attached greenhouse, for those of us who don't have a lot of space in our yards, then we could look at something that can be attached to the house. And this type of structure could be designed such that it blends right into the aesthetic of your existing property, whether it's onto the garage, onto a bedroom, it really doesn't matter. And you don't really have to worry too much about blocking light either, because the greenhouse itself is made of transparent, translucent material. So it encourages the light to come through. So even if it's by a window, the light would still be able from the greenhouse to penetrate through that window. So it really depends on your individual situation and what you want to do. I've seen people who are into flowers put a greenhouse next to or attach it right to their house. And it's almost like it was part of the original construction. So that is something that we can think about as well. Now, the Gothic arch greenhouses, I am mentioning this, but this is not something that you would usually see in our region. This is really designed for load bearing, where in places where it snows a lot, because of the design, the snow would more often than not slides right off of this type of structure, just because of how it's shaped. All right, and most of these are covered with some kind of plastic all around. That is usually the case when you want extra heat inside the greenhouse as well, just to combat the coldness of the winter. Just put it there such that we are open to the different types of greenhouses. The same is like this one. This is a cold frame designed for colder climates, so I won't be spending much time on this. Now, this A-frame greenhouse, I really like the concept behind this one. But just showing the roof here. Some people use it just like this, but the challenge with this is that you could only grow taller crops in the middle. Some people have added 10-foot sidewalls to raise up the roof, and then it becomes a really cool greenhouse because there's lots of room for hot air to go up inside of the attic. And so therefore the ground level is usually much cooler. It is a greenhouse that provides excellent ventilation and natural light. So plants that are requiring full sun, like peppers and tomatoes, once you get sidewalls of maybe 10, 11 feet, this is an excellent choice as well. And you'd realize that it's made of lumber, so you could pick up most of that material to do your framing from the local hardware store in the region. Hoop houses. These can be made of PVC piping or metal, and then you just bend the metal over in like a hoop. This have its drawback in terms of there's really no, it's low, So there's really no space for plastic on the roof. This is almost like a shade house kind of concept. It's really low end, a lot cheaper to build, but it's not that durable either. So, you know, according to your budget, if you're just beginning and you just want to experiment, like I did initially, then you might look at something a little cheaper on the pocket until you get used to it, because it's going to be a teething process anyway. So this is almost like a starter shade house, if you will. But simple to construct, PVC plastic, seen them 1-inch type PVC pipes with all the fittings, and it goes up similar to a tent, meaning you would have your T's on the top, and the pipe would just slip into the T at the top, bend it down, and that would slip into another PVC that goes down into the ground. So it really is easy to put together, but it's easily destroyed as well. All right. This is more of what I was talking about with the A shape, with the sides up now 10 feet. You have a really nice greenhouse that a carpenter or some handy person who could construct very, very easily with used lumber from the hardware stores. And this type of greenhouse I would really recommend for beginners, because it's, with care, it would last. I mean, anything made from lumber is require a little bit more maintenance. So you'd have to get it painted, and maybe every 3 years you paint it over. You just pull off the sides and paint it over, just for longevity of the lumber, because it's out there in the open and will get the elements. So a little bit more maintenance, but yes, this is something that I really would recommend, because most people know somebody who can work with lumber and put this thing together. This is made of PVC. This is without the netting, so you could see exactly what I was talking about. This one is a little different in that it's one length of pipe, maybe a 20-foot 1-inch pipe that just bends over. And so you use 2x6 around the frame just to hold that in place. And whatever area you get from that, that is what you work with. Something like this is good for lettuce production or kale, herbs, mint, no really tall crops like cucumbers that need trellising, or tomatoes or bell peppers or anything like that. Because the roof is so low, you want to keep the plants low as well. So lettuce, leafy green products, lettuce, kale, scallions, herbs, mint, anything like that would do very well in that kind of environment. And you know, it's a low cost environment, but you could make a good dollar from short crops like what I just mentioned. And so you would just pull the netting over this, and away you go. Whether you want to put pots in it, and then like we do at A1, we use 2-gallon pots, fill them with soil, and each plant, whether it's lettuce or tomato or bell pepper, whatever we plant inside, is planted in individual pots. So if something is awry with that particular soil, we would just take it outside, empty that, refill it, put it back in, and away you go. Now, aluminum greenhouses, these are really nice to have, but bear in mind the cost. They're very durable, corrosion resistant, because they're made of aluminum. And so it's an excellent choice for the framing of a greenhouse. This would last you for a really, really long time. With these aluminum frame, they can be glass all around, but glass would not work in our environment because one of our highest challenges here is the cost of electricity. And with a glass greenhouse, you definitely would have to have some cooling inside because the glass would attract a lot of heat. It would allow you to get maximum light, which is nice for the plants. But then on the flip side, the heat from the rays of the sun would definitely need some cooling effect, and that would be the drawback. So with the antithermic plastic, that can be used on the roof. And on the side, we could use the anti-insect netting, all of transparent or translucent material, such that we get maximum light inside. Now, I've seen where, because of the cooling effect, some people use a shade cloth on the top, shade house, and that would work, minimizing the heat as well. But the flip side of that is that you would get moisture from the rain entering the greenhouse, so you would have to deal with the possibility of attracting fungi and all of that. So everything, there is pros and cons. You have to know your area and just adapt accordingly. Glass greenhouse, like I said, I put it here because I really don't want us to leave our space, go someplace else and see glass greenhouses and say, well, how come MakiTrust didn't mention these? So it's just for information purposes, but for our region, these glass houses, unless you want to share some of the monies with me, I don't think we have enough monies here to cool down these greenhouses in the extreme heat and prolonged drought and heat waves that we've been having. But yes, they're greenhouses made strictly of glass. They're cooled by wet walls and high energy. In places like Canada, where electricity is really minimal cost because of the hydroelectric from the Niagara Falls River, is not a problem. But we know in the region, in St. Kitts Nevis for sure, the electricity is one of the higher costs when it comes to your utility bill. So if you could avoid those, then please do. Years ago, I had the privilege of visiting the Cruising Yacht Hotel. They had a state-of-the-art greenhouse there, and most of it was made of glass and had plastic panels. But you know, they had investment money and hoteliers behind them, so they were able to do that. They even were generating their own water. They had some wells where they pumped the water. Well, no, they were pumping water from the sea and using the reverse osmosis process to filter it and get it into fresh water. So that was a big money project, really. The polycarbonate greenhouses, they're really popular, and they're an alternative to the glass greenhouses. We could use the polycarbonate on the roof because yes, it's almost like a plastic sheeting, heavier than the normal plastic that we would use. It allows good penetration of light, and it takes out the harmful UV rays as well. In our region, we would revert to the anti-insect netting for the side walls and the front and the back. So that would be a combination of two different types of material. We realize that this one here would have the sheeting all around, but the sheeting all around definitely would not work in our environment. A word of caution, because I've seen it happen here in Nevis. You would have people come and sit down with me and go through what they need for materials for greenhouses, cost it out, and then they say, well, listen, this is a little bit too expensive. So they would go on the net because the net is there for everybody. And without even engaging someone who knows. They just buy a kit off the internet. When they get here, they put it together and realize that all the covering is plastic. So what they have is not a greenhouse. What they have is a sauna, because then they would get so hot that nothing could survive. All right, so we have to be very, very mindful of and educate ourselves of the greenhouse environment, and what works for one region may not necessarily work for another region. And if we're looking something and we're talking to greenhouse manufacturers, we have to let them know what kind of temperatures we're talking about and where our location is, such that they design something that would suit our tropical environment. It's no use to bring something here that is designed for cold climate, because it would definitely not work for us. It's just a waste of time and money. Just put this one there because it's plastic all over. And like I said, that's a sauna, so no. The frame is similar to the one that was shown with the PVC, but this one is just of galvanized tubing, which is a little bit more sturdy. But you could use the same frame and cover it with anti-insect netting, the transparent anti-insect netting, and have good results. This is the tunnel house. Again, this is more for flowers and so on. Not really recommended for our environment, but just so that you would have the knowledge. Now we get to the specialty greenhouse. We see a lot of these on universities and colleges, research projects and all of that. And they're expensive greenhouses, but they're funded. And you have organizations out there that really fund different researchers. So yes, they serve their purposes, and they really come back and share their findings and publish their papers, so that we farmers can learn from what their findings are. Some people do these research as the thesis for the doctorate and so on in agriculture, and then publish the papers. So in terms of the greenhouse structure and how to operate, those research papers and those types of greenhouses have their places. It's just that they're not designed for commercial operation, because what they do a lot of times is put the plants under varying stress. They're able to control the temperature, humidity, and irrigation down to a T. Most of these research greenhouses are really something to behold. Just thought I should mention it. Just thought we should be aware of it, because they do exist. We mentioned hydroponics earlier, and I'm getting into the inside now of the greenhouses. A lot of times we refer to a greenhouse as a hydroponic greenhouse. And yes, the outside of the greenhouse might look similar to a normal greenhouse that is inside, that is where you plant in soil or another substrate. But what defines a greenhouse is the hydroponic greenhouse is the interior, how the interior is really decorated or laid out. And so what we have here is a series of channels, and the plants are planted directly into what we call net cups. Put the plants into cups, and the cups goes into the different holes in the channels. And what happens is that the black tubing that you see going up to the different channels bring the nutrients to the plants, it's almost like a recycling effect. So on one end of the other end of the channel is a drain, and that drain collects the nutrients that the plant didn't use and collects it in a drum or trough or something like that. And that trough then is outfitted with some pump that would infuse air into the solution that would make the solution ready for the plant to absorb, because oxygen must be in that solution for the plant to be able to take it up to the roots. So what happens is that the nutrients is there. There's a pump that pumps the nutrients up to the channel. The tubes bring the nutrients into one side of the channel, and it just runs down, and it's always going. Water is always running very slowly. And so the plants would feed at any given time when they so desire, right? There is another system, which I don't have here, but I should be able to explain to you what it is. It's called a deep water culture, where it's almost like a pool. And so you have these sheets, maybe the size of a sheet of plywood, but it's a foam sheet, 4x8, and they punch the same type of holes into the foam. Put in the net cups, put in the plant, and that whole foam just floats on the well, for want of words, let's call it a pool. Just floats on top of the pool and pick up the nutrients anytime. But the difference is that this nutrients in the pool stays there. It doesn't go out and then come back. So there's a pump inside the pool that regurgitates the water so that air could be infused into the water. And so that stays there for the duration of the plant life, whether in the case of lettuce, 42 days. If the nutrient level gets low, then they would chop it up until the plant is ready to be harvested. In that case, and in the case of the recycling nutrients, the person who's running the hydroponic system, from time to time, sometimes it's automatic, but in most cases, from time to time, they would have to go and measure what we call the nutrient levels to find out if there's enough nutrients in there for the plants to grow. Sometimes they would have to add according to the reading, because the use over time depletes some of the nutrients. So that is a snapshot of a hydroponic system. I think we looked at that one before. The benefits of using a greenhouse. Now we talk about the different types of greenhouse by construction, by material. Let's look at some of the benefits. Now, a greenhouse extends the growing season. And by that I mean, in Nevis for sure, I could tell you, the majority of farmers who farm short crops like lettuce, cabbage, even bell peppers and tomatoes, they've thrown in the towel for the season already because it's just too hot outside. So the greenhouse farmers now are able to continue planting and growing irrespective of the climatic conditions. Now, footnote, when I say climatic conditions, I don't mean the extreme weather conditions like hurricanes and so on, because that would shut everything down. But I'm talking about a heat wave, extended rainfall. So if you got rainfall for 3-4 days, an outdoor farmer really can't go out and do anything. But the greenhouse farmer is able to go and work as per usual because the plastic covering on the roof don't let any watering, and the netting is netted so tight that you may get little sprays coming in from the side, but nothing to stop you at all. Now, the benefit is that the environmental control, there could be regulation of temperature, humidity, and light. If the temperature is too high, you could turn on the fans. If you don't have enough natural ventilation, the temperature and humidity sometimes go hand in hand. If the light intensity is too much, bringing in too much heat, we could add shade cloth just to shade the plants a little bit. In terms of pest protection, we got reduced risk of pests and diseases. The netting is an anti-insect netting that goes around the greenhouse and the sidewalls. And of course, the insects most of them don't go higher than 10 feet anyway. But the plastic on the roof would deter them from coming in from the roof. But the anti-insect netting would prevent the worms and the flies from going in from the side. Now, having said that though, we have to be very careful here because a lot of us are still, including A1 farms, we're still doing outdoor farming. And sometimes the guys come from the field, don't even think about it, and go into the greenhouse in the same clothes that they were in the field in. And what happens is that the worms might be on the clothes, the eggs might be on the clothes, and once they get into the greenhouse, then you have a problem because it's a closed environment. And if they multiply, they have nowhere to go. They stay there and multiply. So, word of caution, you have to be mindful if you're doing outdoor farming as well, especially in close proximity. When you enter the greenhouse, you have to sanitize yourself or change your clothes as the case may be, just to prevent or reduce the chances of insects and the spreading of diseases in the greenhouse itself. Now, in terms of pests, yes, we've got a lot of monkeys here in Nevis, and I've yet to see them, as smart as they are, get into the greenhouse environment. So I've seen rats bite the netting, but that netting is pretty strong, so it really takes it's very difficult. But then, you could throw a little party for the rats them and keep them at bay. Higher yields. Research shows that the potential to increase production and healthier plants is much greater inside the greenhouse than outdoors, especially you don't have all of the outdoor elements to deal with, whether stray animals, worms, insects, that kind of thing. So the yield potential inside the greenhouse really increases. The other thing is that the fruits and vegetables that you get from inside the greenhouse is of such better quality. It's almost like it's blemishless. Some people have come and asked, see them inspecting the cucumbers, want to know if they're imported, if they're real, but it's just that they're grown in a different and a more conducive environment. Let's look at some of the common things that we grow inside the greenhouse. Greenhouse, shade house, remember I said we're using these terms kind of interchangeably and loosely. Tomatoes, bell peppers, cucumbers, lettuce, melons, strawberries, roses, orchids, herbs. These are some of the main crops growing in the greenhouse. I've done callaloo with great success. I've done spinach with great success. I've done basils with great success as well. Swiss chard, kale, all these leafy greens do very well inside the greenhouse. One of the things that we have to bear in mind is that the for the most part, the greenhouse is an expensive venture. And so you want to maximize the profits. You want to maximize the use of the greenhouse, because it does make sense to have this expensive environment, this expensive machinery, and you're not making your full returns from it at all. But we'll get more into that later on. Now, this is a typical local greenhouse. This is A1 Farms. This is back, my son is 10 now. This is back when he was 5. This is our lettuce production. So we have inside there, we have some leafy greens, we have some green romaine, we have some red romaine. And the beauty about the greenhouse is that it's a very clean environment. So you could work in there and leave from inside and go to an office and have a meeting, no problem at all. But yes, it's clean, but you have to keep it clean. Another word of caution, because a lot of us believe that because we have a greenhouse, we don't need to put the time in. Don't be fooled. You may not have the weeding to do because you have the ground cover, but the plants are in a delicate environment, and so they need attention just like babies. Right? Planting, especially tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers, these are plants that would need pruning, trellising, and care, because the tomato vine, the tomatoes that we grow inside the greenhouse, and I will show a little bit, but I think it's important, is there are 2 real species of tomatoes. There's the one that you grow outside, which we call the determinate species, and that would fruit for maybe 2-3 weeks at a time, and then that's it. The one that we use in the greenhouse is an indeterminate species, and that would fruit maybe up to 8-10, up to a year in the proper environment. And so over the course of that growth, I've had them grow up to 40 feet. So every time they grow up on the chalice and reach 10 feet up, then you lower them down and then they start to go back up again. And so over that life of the tomato plant, once it's well maintained and managed, you could reap up to about 35 pounds of tomato from that one plant over its lifetime, just to put things in context. This is another picture from A1 Farms where we have 2 greenhouses cascaded. And on the first one, closest to you, you would see we've got some iceberg lettuce. Then we've got the straight leaf lettuce, which is a romaine lettuce. And then right by the pole, those are kale. And behind that, on the far end, those are tomatoes. If you look closely, you would see the strings or the trellis that supports the tomato plant. All right? These ones were just starting to blossom, I think. This is another picture here where you could see clearly on the right the tomato plant being trellised, and you realize there's no side shoots, meaning that you have to prune the tomatoes. This one just started to flower. I think this is the same picture from a different angle. Yeah, and you would see the string. There's some extra string on the end of it, and that is to support the plant, because the plant would grow, like I said, up to about 40 feet over its lifetime. So as it go up, you lower it and you send it back up. Same, well, with the cucumbers. The cucumbers, we normally trellis them with no extra string, because they would go up about 10 feet. And once they reach up, we'd send them over the trellis, and they go coming right back down, almost like upside down. These cucumbers for the greenhouse, they would fruit for 6 to 8 weeks continuously. Unlike the cucumbers that we grow outdoors, the outdoor cucumber, you'd be lucky if you could get 3 or 4 pickings from them. But these ones, you could pick from them twice per week for up to 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes we get a little bit more than that in the cooler months, like from November back down to February. We could get up to 10 weeks of picking. Now, we touched on it a little earlier, but I think it's appropriate to really drive home the advantages of the greenhouse. And it really provides appropriate climatic conditions for the plant to grow. Protect the plant from pests and weeds, which can damage the crop. Provide food security from unseen weather conditions. Remember I said, it really doesn't matter how much it rains, once it's not hurricane type weather, we could go on and plant and reap and get food to the market. Because of the shade in the greenhouse and the fact that the irrigation system really brings water directly to the plant zone, the evaporation losses are down, and we don't have waste of water and nutrients. It's really efficient inside the greenhouse. And we know in these periods of drought, we really can't afford to use more water than we have to. We can have low construction costs if we're handy people and we are in areas where we could get local materials like bamboos and so on. I've been to Mexico and seen huge greenhouses made from bamboo, and the produce inside there was no less than the ones that were made of the expensive aluminum frames and so on. So yes, the greenhouse could be very costly. That could be one of the challenges. But if we have handy people around, and most farmers are handy people, because yes, once we go on the farm, if there's a broken pipe, we got to fix it. If there's a problem with the mist blower, we got to fix it. And so a lot of times we are well-rounded. So we could use the materials that are available locally. Better quality of light is received by, remember I alluded to earlier, the different types of plastic material blocking the harmful UV rays from entering the greenhouse and just allowing the light to come through. So yes, that would kind of eliminate the heat, but more of what we want is light. We can't have too much light. Plants like light. Most vegetables like full sun. Lettuce, no problem. If you realize that if you have 3-4 dark days, rainy days, you find that the lettuce started to grow tall. And so that's a sign that they're searching for light. So full sun, not a problem. Maintaining a steady crop production cycle. What we can do here, and I stress maybe all year round, we're able now to go into the supermarkets. Hello? We're able now to go into the supermarkets and sit down with the managers and say, listen, I'm doing greenhouse farming. I could supply you with, say, cucumbers for the next 3 months because I've got enough space to plant 2 crops. So if you got 2 crops going, you could even negotiate for a longer period, because once you have that plant cycle down and know that, hey, I'll be picking cucumbers from this particular crop for the next 6 to 8 weeks. All you have to do is, as soon as that crop starts to fruit, then you plant the other, because you know the other crop would, a cucumber, stay about 42 days before it produces fruit. So you have that cycle worked out. So then you could sit down with the supermarket manager or the hotelier and start a discussion, because you are almost 90% sure that you'll be able to bring produce to the market. The quality of the produce is improved, and the quantity of your yields is improved as well. Now, I've got less labor intensive. But I want to put a footnote to that because I don't want people to think that because you have a greenhouse, everything is automatic. You still have to look after the plants, like I said, prune the plants. Yes, you may not have the weeds to worry about. You may have an automatic watering system, but then your labor and your expertise is needed elsewhere in the care of the plant and making sure that your drip lines are clean, and the plant is getting the right amount of nutrients at all times. We spoke about the water conservation because the water is going straight to the root zone and you're doing drip irrigation. You could water for 3-minute interval, 5 minutes interval, 4 times a day. And so you'd be using a lot less water. Some research show up to 90% less water than it would take for the same amount of plants on the outdoor because of the evaporation, and sometimes because you're in soil like that, not in a container, then that water is dispersed away from the roots as well. You got greater control of pests and diseases like I alluded to earlier. And of course, when you have all these things in play, you would boost your consumer confidence in the farmers because they know that you're reliable. You could bring quality produce to the market on a weekly basis. Now, with anything, you've got your pros and you got your cons. So I would say, despite all the gains made in protected agriculture, many of the growers have been unable to sustain and optimize crop yields. And I tell you why. Inappropriate designs of protected structures for the climatic conditions of the region and the production practices like I alluded to earlier. Some people are going on the net, ordering greenhouses that are not suited and cannot be adapted to this environment. The cost of the greenhouse structures, I know this is debatable, but the proper greenhouse structures are still very prohibitive for many of us farmers, because I would tell you that 100 by 30 steel structure greenhouse with proper plastic on the top, proper netting, and good irrigation system, plus planting material would run you about $150,000 easy dollars. Having said all of that, once you manage your plant well, you could recoup that investment cost in about 3 to 4 years. So the trade-off is there. The technical support needed to adequately manage these protected agriculture systems is still very much lacking in the region. I am one of the ones that is considered to be successful, but I will tell you why. I have put the time in, the research in, and I'm still researching on a weekly basis. So being self-taught is not a bad thing, but a lot of us really don't have the enthusiasm and the time to make these mistakes that I did. That's why I am very open and want to share all that I know, because I really don't think that farmers should have to go through that teething process. Agriculture Extension Division is there for that reason. But sometimes, and I'd say that because I'm a frank person, sometimes what happens is that they come and instead they're looking to help you, they're looking to help themselves. And so I'm sure it's not much different in the other territories. Materials and supplies are not readily available. A lot of these materials and supplies we have to import. And so that is a little challenging at times. I know during COVID, thank God I was able to stockpile some fertilizer and other supplies before the borders got closed. But once we're depending on outside companies and countries to supply us, then we are at a big disadvantage. in terms of the greenhouse, there's some technologies now where we're doing vertical farming. And I put this down as a disadvantage because I alluded to it earlier, the electricity cost is very high. So unless we could get some solar systems and the cost of solar, the initial cost is high as well. That could be a disadvantage. The added cost of security, because people believe that because you're having a greenhouse, then you got some good produce in there. If they could go in and get a 50 pounds of tomatoes or 50 pounds of peppers and hustle them off, then, they're onto something. So that may drive up your costs as well. We alluded to the high investment costs. This one is short, but it's very, very serious. Underutilized greenhouses is a real problem, because if you have an expensive machinery, for want of words to call the greenhouse, it really doesn't make any sense to waste any space or any time inside that greenhouse. As soon as one crop comes out, you should be ready to put the other crop in, if not the same day, the very next day, because you want to maximize the use of the greenhouse. And the cash crops, you know the production cycle for the cash crop. So there's like a lettuce is 42 days from seed. So there's no reason at all that in 6 weeks, that, hey, that first crop, I would need to replace that first crop in 6 weeks, and the seedling takes 3 weeks. So once you sow your first set of seedlings, in 3 weeks you sow the second set, and the cycle continues until you're at a rotation system where if you have enough space, you could be sowing seeds like we do at A1 Farms twice per week, because we reap lettuce twice per week. So once lettuce comes out, seedling go back in. All right, so that is very, very important. So the other thing is that the greenhouse separates the plant from the surrounding atmosphere. Therefore, pollination is not likely to occur. Having said that, I must bring to your attention that you can't just get any plant, any seedling, and put it inside the greenhouse. Because if that plant is requiring pollination, then you got a problem, because there's no bees inside the greenhouse to pollinate those plants. So in the greenhouse, we're looking for plants that are self-pollinated, plants that doesn't need pollination, like leafy greens. Once you get into tomatoes, yes, tomatoes would need pollination, but there are certain varieties that grow better inside the greenhouse than others. And when you go looking for seeds, you have to look for greenhouse seeds. And then there are mechanical ways to pollinate. We would install fans, and the fans would blow the pollen, and the pollen would pollinate the different flowers. So you have to understand the inner workings of the greenhouse, because it's a totally different environment to outside. Okay? So let's wrap up a little bit. We've looked at the use of the greenhouse technology and how farmers have been using this technology to mitigate extreme weather conditions caused by climate change. And we've said that the greenhouse can be used in different climatic conditions for different purposes. Most importantly, greenhouses increases agricultural yields. We've established that, enabling producers to meet the food demand of a growing population and hence aid in the sustainability of food. We also said that because of the, you're better able to manage your crops, so you could go in and have a meaningful conversation with the managers of the supermarkets and so on. The other big thing with the greenhouse is that it really reduces the amount of water used per square meter or per plant compared to outdoor farming. There's a vast difference. It's about a 90% difference. It protects against heavy rainfall, erosion, and controls temperature and humidity. Whether you have to induced forced ventilation or is natural ventilation, as in most cases. Caution here though, before construction, one must plan properly. Just a word of advice. Different greenhouses are more suited for different, how should I put that? Not all greenhouses are suited for tropical climates. So we must understand what we're getting for our region. It is crucial that the correct type is chosen for both the needs of the user and the needs of the plant. Very, very important. We have to have a design to suit whatever crop that we're planting, and not have the greenhouse and then decide, hey, I could only plant lettuce when it was really peppers you wanted to plant. So the user must be properly trained on how to operate and maintain the greenhouse. Now, I would say no matter how much training that or classes that you go to, the passion is what will drive you. The passion is what drove me to do all the research and so on. And I'm still researching on a daily basis. What I would encourage is a lot of documentation, such that you don't make the same mistake that you made last season or last crop. And so you establish the timelines, how soon the plant fruit, and then you start to make your analysis from there. Because, like I said, the extension officers, they're lagging behind in terms of the technology. So they, in most cases in Nevis and syndicates, they really can help you in the greenhouse environment. I've helped a lot of people because it's just an unfortunate situation to put that investment out there and then you can't get the best returns from it. But I still stress, once you're into it and your enthusiasm is there and you've been seeing the results, it just drives you to do more, to understand more, and to make the best of your greenhouse and the greenhouse environment. Having said that, closing off the lecture session, thank you for your time and attention. I'm open to questions, comments, ideas, discussions, whatever it is. You've heard me for maybe an hour and a half. Now it's time to hear from you and to see if I could put some clarity to certain things that I've said that may not be clear in your mind. So feel free. Madam Moderator?
Hi, thank you.
No problem at all.
We have some questions in the chat. I'm going to read
Okay.
it out for you.
Certainly.
Okay. This one is from Barry. In the tropics, shouldn't we be more concerned with shade houses instead of greenhouses?
Well, let me put it this way. The greenhouses that we use here at A1 Farms provide some shade because the plastic does filter some of the harmful rays, like the UV rays from it. The netting on the side is made of translucent and transparent material, the netting, so it allows light in it. But there's still some form of shade. Now, the difference, and I was trying to simplify it as much as possible, the difference between what I call the greenhouses is the roof structure. The ones that have plastic roof, I refer to those as greenhouses. It's not in the true sense of a greenhouse because there's a lot of natural ventilation still. But the shade house would have netting and stuff all around. Now there's a darker netting. Well, there's different shades of netting. Some would allow 50% light, some would do 80% light, and so on. So it really depends on the type of crop you're growing, and where your location is really. Because, for example, in the cooler months and the shorter days, I find some of the shade houses with the darker shade, the leafy greens grow tall. They're not getting enough sunlight. So we have to be careful with the type of shade that we use. But that's my little difference in the classification of the greenhouse and the shade house.
Okay. Valerie? Okay, we have a second question. Does the size of the greenhouse influence the growth of the plants in any way? That's from Bernadette.
No, Bernadette, the size of the house really doesn't contribute to the growth of the plant. But let me put a caveat on that. Remember, we spoke about the hoop houses, which were the ones that were made of the galvanized tubing or the PVC. Those ones are much lower than a full greenhouse that would have sidewalls. Now, in those lower houses, not the size, but the height, you could only plant short crops like lettuce, kale, scallions, spinach, and so on, because the tomato plant or the cucumber plant would not have enough room to grow vertically. But the size of the house itself really doesn't have any impact on the growth of the plant. It's just the limitations of what you could grow inside. Okay?
Okay, so it doesn't affect the size would not affect the distribution of the heat then. I was wondering about that as well.
No, the size doesn't have anything to do with that. Remember, the hot air rises. So the lower the house itself is, the more heat it would trap down there, because the hot air wouldn't get a chance to go above the comfort level of the plants. So that's why you would stick to only plants that are grown close to the ground, like lettuce and so on. Any clarity?
Yeah.
Yeah, the height makes a difference, but not the actual length and the width.
So you choose the crops based on the structure of the greenhouse that you have.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, bottom line. So if you're gonna do lettuce, you could get away with a shade house or a greenhouse that is not 10 feet high sidewalls, because the hot air would rise, but down by the ground where the lettuce is would still be cool. Any clearer?
Very much so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Bernadette had another question. Approximately how expensive is the hydroponic system as compared to the traditional planting in the long run?
I think over time it pays for itself, but the upfront cost is very, very high. And it's hard to give you a dollar figure, because there's so many different types of hydroponic systems out there and companies that it's very difficult. But what I would say is that the traditional method of planting is a lot less than a hydroponic system. For example, at A1, we're still planting in soil. But what we do, we employ the use of 2-gallon pots, polyethylene pots, plastic pots. and we fill them with soil. Sometimes we mix the soil with a little bit of manure. If the soil is clay, a lot of clay content, we would mix that with maybe a little bit of peat moss or something to loosen it up over time. But then we would plant the lettuce, the tomato, the pepper, whatever it is, inside the soil. Now, let me explain something here. What happens, and when I say it's a lot easier in soil, because the soil have properties in there that would do some correction, meaning if your nutrients to the plant doesn't have all the elements, the soil itself have elements in there that could compensate. In the hydroponic system, there's no guessing. You have to get the nutrients right because there's no soil to bail you out. Nowadays, it's a lot easier with hydroponics and the nutrients, because a lot of the nutrients now are coming pre-mixed or in bulk. And then they would tell you, okay, a gallon of this solution would do 50 gallons of water, for example, concentrated. So all you would have to do is take the 1 gallon and add it to your 50 gallons of water. Just a few years ago, what used to happen is that you would have to have, it said 50 gallons of water, but then you would have to add whatever ratio it is of nutrients. So, for example, 2 pounds of nitrogen, 4 pounds of calcium, 3 pounds of phosphorus, and then maybe 2 ounces of boron, magnesium, and so on. And then stir that and then put it in the 50-gallon drum. But nowadays, most of that is already mixed for you. And then it's like a formula. And now you just add it to the 50 gallons of water. So it's not as difficult as it used to be, but it's expensive.
We have another question from Ms. Swanston.
Mhm.
Can a dilapidated concrete house be used as a sort of greenhouse? Your thoughts?
The thing is, the foundation maybe, but remember the walls on the roof have to be made of transparent, translucent material so that the light could come in, The light from, if you just change the roof and put plastic on the roof, then you would have to employ some kind of lighting inside to compensate for the light that is not coming through the sidewalls. So it's a lot more, it's a lot trickier to convert that concrete house into a greenhouse. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I'm questioning the availability of light. I'm not quite sure. Well, I'm sure you won't get adequate lighting from the roof alone, because once the sun is not directly overhead, then you'd get a lot of shadowing. And that's where the sidewalls made of transparent material comes in. So unless you're producing your own electricity to get proper lighting inside, then you would struggle. I mean, I've seen hydroponics done in containers successfully, but the thing is, they've got adequate lighting in there. They've got adequate lighting. Even vertical farming, they've got adequate lighting. They've got these special grow lights that would compensate for sunlight. So unless you could produce your own electricity, or afford the cost of electricity, I think you have an uphill task ahead. Any more questions, please? I'm here.
More, we still have a few in the chat.
Okay, beautiful.
Maureen has 2 questions. I am aware of electricity bills are quite high in the Caribbean. Can one make a one-off investment in solar for the greenhouses? Next question, can one build a greenhouse on a slope land?
Answer both questions is yes. The investment in solar, once you could afford it, is the way to go, because rightly said, it's a one-time investment, and you would get your returns. You know, you would amortize that maybe over 4 or 5 years, and after that, it's gravy for you. But a lot of us farmers, that initial upfront cost is the prohibitive factor. What I would encourage, having said that though, is whatever we're doing, we document everything, such that when we want to expand, we have good documentation to present to the financial institutions. I was privileged enough to sit on the credit union board for 6 years. And that is one of the drawbacks that we had. As a farmer, I was trying my best to assist in the procurement of financing. But a lot of times they give you very little to work with. So in this space, I'm encouraging all, and aware of varying background and so on. But even if it's a notepad, you date it up every day and you keep your records. Because financial institutions, they tell you about paperless, but nothing goes so. They like to see paper. Right? Now, on a slope land, yes, you can build a greenhouse on a slope land, although it's preferred on flat land. But what you have to do is make the floor as level as possible. You could go with the slope of the land, but when it comes to the irrigation, that is the part that gets a little challenging. So the irrigation lines, you would have to find a way to get that level enough. Or you would have to get the proper emitters that doesn't allow gravity to feed them. Meaning, if you turn off your water source and it's on slope land, all the nutrients would go to the end of the drip line downhill. If you have, what's the name of that emitter? There's a special emitter that would not allow water to go through unless it's a pressure emitter, unless there's a certain amount of pressure going through that water line, such that when you turn off the water, even if water is in the line, it doesn't come out through the emitter to the plant. If that doesn't happen, what would happen is that the plants downslope would get 10 times more water than they really need, because the plant up the slope, once that gets enough water and you turn the drip line off, that all the water would go down to the bottom of the drip line and feed the plants down there. So that's the only downside to it. What I've seen on the slope land though is they run the drip lines perpendicular to the slope of the land, such that the water doesn't settle downhill. It goes perpendicular, the drip line goes across, and that works from what I've seen. Next.
Okay. That's from Kathy. Can you plant back the same seedlings or crop or a different one in the same area, or do you rotate them?
Crop rotation is good, but you don't have to rotate every crop cycle. For example, I've been planting successfully lettuce in the same soil, in the same pot for about a year. So what we do at A1 is that we just add a little manure to the pot. Now, lettuce is an easy crop to do that with, but once you get into tomatoes and peppers, then you may have to, because these tomatoes and peppers have a longer life cycle than the lettuce. The lettuce is only 42 days in the greenhouse environment. Now, with proper care and management, the tomato would run you from 6 months straight down to a year. So having that plant in that same soil all the time would definitely drain most of the nutrients out of the soil. Apart from the nutrients, if the soil start to pick up any kind of disease that would affect that tomato, then the next cycle may be a problem. Yes, you can get away with it with short crops, but I wouldn't encourage it for longer life cycle crops like tomatoes and bell peppers and so on. But crop rotation is always good.
We have another question from Shinepo. I hope I pronounced your name right. How do you think greenhouses can be more accessible to more people? Or if they are accessible, who's responsible for the perspective that it isn't?
I'm not quite sure I'm understanding, but let me try here. What's happening here is that we all have established that the upfront cost of greenhouse is prohibitive. What I think needs to happen is that the powers that be, meaning the governments, the different governments. I know there's a lot of talk about 25 by 25, reducing the import of vegetables and crop, well, vegetables and fruits into the Caribbean by 25% by the year 2025. I don't see that happening. But if they're serious, they need to support farmers and give farmers the tools to do such. I know in St. Kitts, there's a big drive to have what they term to be a greenhouse city. They're planning to put 25 greenhouses in an area, standalone, and have different farmers assigned to them. Now, that's one way. The other thing is, I believe that some of these government agencies, like in Nevis, a small development enterprise unit, I believe that they can provide some low-cost loans to farmers who are very interested in the greenhouse farming. But having said all of that, I believe it should be mandatory, for these prospective farmers to show the interest by taking some kind of course in greenhouse technology, such that they equip themselves and do the research on their own, such that they equip themselves and show that they're really interested, because it's very difficult for, and we spoke in different forums about revolving fund, but what we find is that some people get loans at low cost and they shy away from their commitment. And then being governments, they can't get the monies collected. And so people who come after that to take part in the same program, there's nothing there for them. But these are some of the ideas that I have. And then even our local credit unions and so on should be more receptive to farmers who are, I would say in inverted commas, serious farmers. Because in my mind, if you're serious, you should be able to put some skin in the game, meaning even if you come with a 10% down payment or something, you should be able to bring something to the table. Because when you look at it, there's no financial institution that would finance any farming project 100%. Farming is risky business, and we all know that as farmers. One hurricane and that's it. And I've been searching all over the Caribbean for insurance. Still haven't had promises, but still there's nothing. I understand that the OCS governments, the governments of the Caribbean met in Barbados last month, and that was one of the topics on the table, and they're making some traction, but I haven't heard anything since. So those are some of the things that I would like to see happen, but we as farmers need to be more vigilant as well. We need to make a case for ourselves.
Anne-Marie, you have a question?
Yes. What sort of nutrients is being used in the water in the for grain of vegetables?
Okay. At A1 Farms, we're still growing in soil. So I use a complete mix fertilizer, which is called a 20-20-20 fertilizer.
Is that bonus?
No, there's two brand names of it. It's called a complete mix, but there's a company called Peters that makes one, and I can't remember the other company at all. But basically, what happens is that you have your NPK, your nitrogen, your phosphorus, and your potassium. So
Yeah.
those ratios are 20-20-20, and then that same fertilizer having all of the micronutrients except maybe calcium. So you have your boron, your magnesium, your zinc, and your copper, and so on. So it's a complete mixed fertilizer, and I want to believe that the calcium may be excluded. So every now and again, I would add a little calcium to my solution. So you remember earlier I said initially you would have had to add all of these individual fertilizer to 50 gallons.
Yeah.
It would give you a ratio, but now it's a lot easier. And that 20-20-20 works well for me throughout my whole crop cycles.
Okay.
And maybe because I'm in dirt, there's a little compensation for that. It gives a little bit more, because if you're short of, say, calcium in the mix, it uses the calcium from the soil. Yeah. That fertilizer, there's a company called VAS, VAS. They're in South Miami,
Okay.
and it's about a 25-pound bag for 36 US dollars.
Okay. I have another question.
Sure,
You made
certainly.
mention about using foam. You can use foam in the water and plant the plants in.
Right.
Could that foam be used in the earth also?
No, because the only reason why you use a foam is the foam is used as a flotation device for the plant.
Okay.
It doesn't add any nutritional value to the cycle at all. All the
So
foam does is support the plant. It floats on the water. You cut the hole in the foam, just like you see in the hydroponics channel.
So it doesn't keep keep the soil moist at the root of the plant.
No, there's really no, on outdoor farming, there's really no use except maybe if you use it as a mulch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
in terms of nutritional value, no. In hydroponics, all it is a flotation device for and support structure for the plant.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Leisha, Gustav, you have a question? Okay,
Hello?
we go.
Hello?
Hi.
Can you hear me?
you. Yeah, go ahead,
All
please.
right. When you were speaking about the tomatoes, and you were speaking about the different things or the different ways that you could pollinate them.
Mhm.
I worked with at a hotel, and we were doing hand pollination. But the way we used to do it is, since we didn't have a mechanized way of doing it, it was actually, well, like I said, hand pollinated. So we there were cables because the tomatoes that we had were indeterminate varieties,
Right.
and they would stay for probably about a year, or we would just use one cycle because the hotel would close probably once for that year. So I would just use that as the cycle. When the hotel closed, I just cut down the plants.
Okay.
And what they were doing, since it was cable running from one end to the other, which was
Right.
about 120 feet long,
Mhm.
what the tomatoes were hanging by the bobbins. They were hanging from the cable coming down to the plant, because we were doing potted plants. And one of the ways that we pollinated was we were taking the PVC pipes.
Mhm.
We were getting
And hitting.
the sturdy PVC pipes and going through the middle of the lines and then rattling them.
Yep,
So
that's
that was
one way as
another
well.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So I
another way
was
as
just
well. Yeah,
Okay, so
good.
the just making this comment based on, I mean, persons probably who are not able to afford the mechanized way of doing it,
Mhm.
just offering the suggestion that they can also do the rattling.
Right.
No, but
And it's important to do that in the hottest time of the day, between like 12 and 2 o'clock, when the pollens
yes.
are flying.
So when you mention it, I mean, I could remember not
Yeah.
liking to do it because it was a very tedious thing. So just imagine you going for a greenhouse of 120 feet long and probably about 40 feet wide. And then
Right,
there were
right.
about 50, if you plant them in cycles and you had all these things being pollinated at the same time, and
Mhm.
there's only three staff at hand, there was about 5,000 plants being pollinated
Yep.
at the same time. So
I feel,
it brought good bad memories.
yeah, I feel you. Yeah, but that is a very good point. And that's how we started doing before we put up all the fans and so on. But the other thing that I've seen people, these electric toothbrush going from one plant to the next and so on. That is
Yes,
tedious.
yes.
That is
But that is
tedious.
also tedious because these tomatoes were probably about 20, they would grow over 20 feet tall.
Yeah,
So
but
we would
that's
have
what I'm
to
saying. But
probably get them in a circular, well, clip them on themselves so we can
yeah,
reach to that level. So taking a
but what?
toothbrush and still doing 5,000 plants, that is sometimes
Yeah,
you have nothing else to do.
but what would have been a lot easier if them same cables, what we do is string up to the cable, go over the cable, and bring it down and have some extra string. So when the plant reaches up like 8-10 feet, we lose the
Mhm.
string and we lower the plant.
Yes, we would do that too. We're
Right.
loosening also.
Right. So you wouldn't let it go over the cable, because sometimes what
Mhm.
happens is that the tomatoes are so heavy that when it comes over the cable, the plant itself break.
Yeah.
The stem break.
Or they were
Yeah.
doing something called, I think, gliding. You would glide them so they can lay one on top of the other, going
Ah,
in
okay.
that direction.
Okay.
Or so you
Yeah.
just choose a direction, or you train the plant to go in one direction. So
Yeah.
or the
So
whole line will just put in one direction.
right, and when you reach to the back of the greenhouse, you send it back up. So it's like
Yeah.
you walk back, you walk down, and you come back up. So in a case like that, what happens is that when you go in the greenhouse, you see all of these stalks just running in one direction. And then when you come back up the other row, all of them come in up and then they're just going up, but you don't let them go up more than about 8 feet, because more than 8 feet up, it start to get a little warm up there. But that's a very good observation. I'm here. Who's next?
One more thing, in terms of light sensitivity, because I mean, the person we were working with at the time, that's one of the things that he mentioned, because the securities probably at night they would want the light to probably walk around the greenhouse. And then I mean, the person I was working with at the time, he was very upset that that the lights was actually installed, because they were not just coming on and off, they were on all the time. And he was saying that, I mean, at that time, the plants are light sensitive. At night, they should be getting dark. They should be getting this dark part, not light. And then they were not producing as, I witnessed that they were not producing as such because they were light sensitive. That's one of the things that one of the observations that I made with the indeterminate varieties. I don't know if you've observed that.
That one is a new one to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing is, we rely on natural lighting, so I haven't experienced textual lighting in the plant.
It was night. It was actually night light. That's what I mean. So in the night, we wanted the greenhouse to be dark at night.
Right.
So
right.
it was during the day it was fine, but nighttime they would have a high beam light flashing into the greenhouse.
Yeah,
and
what
then
they did is
when we took
confuse
off
the hell
that
out of the
light,
plant.
they were just doing the flowers and they were not producing. They were not producing the fruit. When we
Yeah.
turn off those lights, or we got those lights out, they continued producing.
Yeah, so the plants were definitely confused.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plants were definitely confused.
Thank you, Lisha. Annie Ball, you have a question? Annie?
Yes, hi, good night.
Good night.
Evening.
I think one of my questions was answered already about the pollination in the greenhouse, because I wanted to hear more about that. You guys have spoke extent. My other question is, are there organic solution for hydroponic?
Well, let's put it this way. Most of the fertilizers you really don't have to be concerned about, because even the chemical, what is termed as chemical fertilizers come from the earth. Huh? All of the petroleum products and stuff, the nitrogen, all of those are naturally occurring substances. What we should be concerned about, in my opinion, is the pesticides and the insecticides, not the fertilizer. Because for the most part, the fertilizers are naturally occurring substances. They just probably use some machinery to package it and process it and so on. That's not where the problem is. The problem is with the pesticides and the insecticides and the herbicides and so on. That is where the problem is. Now, back to the pollination issue. What we have to really consider is the type of seeds that we're buying. Remember, I said earlier, you have to buy seeds that are designed for the greenhouse environment. The outdoor tomatoes will bear, but they would not perform as much or as good as the indeterminate type tomatoes that is spec'd or specified for greenhouse environment. So that is the first thing you have to do. And you have to make sure that you're planting seeds. The science is there to guide you. Seeds that would do well in the greenhouse environment, because you have this expensive machinery. You have to get your money's worth and more from it. And I'm living proof that if you manage it well, you could get your return on your investment in 3 to 4 years.
Okay, thank you very much. And that piece of information is very useful about having the right seeds for greenhouse.
Right.
I learned about having the right seeds for climate and that, but in terms of the greenhouse, this is kind of new information for me. So
Yep.
I'm glad for
Um,
that.
there's one site that you may want to make a note of. It's called Paramount, just like the
Okay.
cinema, Paramount Seeds. So you could just go on the
Yeah.
net and look for Paramount Seeds and make sure when you go onto that site, you click on, well, this mostly sells seeds for greenhouse production. You would see, and then you could research the different seeds and so on.
Okay, thank you. That is
All right.
great.
Johnny Seeds is another one as well.
Johnny.
Paramount Seeds and Johnny Seeds.
Thank you.
Because, yeah, our local agriculture department and agriculture stores and stuff really doesn't cater too much for us as greenhouse farmers. So everything I for sure at A1 Farms would have to, I supply most of the greenhouse farmers here in St. Kitts and Nevis. But everything is imported. So, but you have to go to the right sources.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I would tell you something further. In terms of cucumber, I've had really, really good success with cucumber, but it didn't come overnight. I think I went through about 6 different varieties before I found the one that I've settled on. Geez, the name just slipped me. But I remember it. It's cucumber. There's 2 of them. There's an English Dutch cucumber that does very well in the greenhouse environment. And then there's another one. Cheese. It's a slicer, but it fruits really, really well. The name is just eluding me for a second here. But I'll remember, even if it's the next session on Thursday, I'll remember it.
Okay, this will be our last question. Sheila Francis, are you there?
Ms. Francis?
I am.
Okay,
Yes.
talk to me.
My question is, I have noted that the roofs of the greenhouses are either A-shaped or circular. Is there any specific reason for this, or can they be flat as well?
Yeah, well, most of the roofs, like you said, are circular or A-shaped. Flat is more for shade houses, and I tell you why. When you have a flat roof and it's of plastic, that plastic would trap a lot of water and mean a lot of weight sitting on the roof itself. You see where I'm coming from? Just like a tent. And sometimes if the tent get a little belly in it, it traps the water. And when it traps the water, it gets heavy. But remember, the tent is almost like an A or rounded. So imagine that plastic is flat. If it traps that water on top there, we're asking for problems. So that's why most of the greenhouses would have a circular roof for the runoff or an A-shaped roof for the runoff. And let me say this while I'm at it. Most of these greenhouses would be outfitted with gutters to do some water harvesting. And so the gutter would run from the front to the back on the long side. And then at the back, you would have some kind of catchment. I've been using some 1,000-gallon tanks because that was the easiest thing to implement at the time. But you could build a cistern, some kind of catchment behind there to harvest the water because, as we know, the water that we get from our taps is very hard, full of calcium and chlorine. There's nothing to beat that harvested water at all, and especially in the drought areas, and some of us are off the grid where we really don't have running water as farmers. So we have to implement these measures to make sure that we have water on our farms at all times, because without water, you can't do no kind of greenhouse farming, because remember, inside there, the plant is like your child. It depends on you for everything. It depends on you for sunlight. It depends on you for nutrients. It depends on you for cleaning, meaning pruning. It depends on you for harvesting. It depends on you for trellising. It depends on you for everything. So, yeah. Oh, I remember now, the name of the cucumber, and you could note this for those of you who are planting cucumber. It's a Corinto, Corinto. Took me a few years before I came across that one. It's a little bit expensive, and most of these greenhouse seeds would be expensive. And this is one that you can harvest. You can harvest the seeds from it and replant, because they don't, the seeds doesn't seem like they're mature. Or maybe I don't leave them long enough, I don't know. But I've never been able to harvest those seeds and get good reproduction from them. But that one plant would give you maybe about 30 pounds not 30, no, not 30. Upwards of 10 pounds per plant, I think. Yeah.
Okay, Mr.
Fruits-
Trust,
fruits really well.
we have one more question. Diana, are you ready? Diana, are you there?
Come on, Diana.
So, hi, good night. So my
Good
question
night.
was actually about the building of the greenhouse. I know you mentioned that there's some materials that are not conducive for environment. So I was wondering if perhaps we could have like a mixed material for that. For example, you could have the polyethylene roof with maybe the net sides, or you know, mix and match plastic with
Oh, yeah.
something else.
Yeah, for sure. The thing is, the roof can be made of, in our environment, can be made of plastic, or the polyethylene material, the harder sheeting, no problem at all. But it must be the sides and all the material must be transparent, translucent, must allow maximum light in. Yeah, we could mix and match it. Just that, be sure that we can't employ plastic on the roof and plastic on the sides. We're building a sauna, people. We're not building a greenhouse. So it's good for good sweat out and so on, but the plants won't thank you for that at all. Next session, we're going to be looking at the construction and the maintenance of the greenhouse. I'll get more into the plants that we grow in the greenhouse, how to care them, and so on. I think that is very important for us to know.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Trust. In such valuable information on the different greenhouses options and which ones are best suitable for the Caribbean. For those of you interested in getting greenhouses, I hope you were able to take note of the expert advice of Mr. Trust. His insight will certainly help guide you.
Guys, before we go, if there are any questions, you can always bring them back next week. Our moderator, you could give them my email and they could shoot me an email. I have no problems there at all. Because sometimes it's only when we walk away certain things start to get digested and so on. So feel free at any time to reach out. Like I say, my thing is that it was hard work for me, and I really wouldn't want anybody to have to go through and do all the research by themselves. So if I've got knowledge too that would help somebody, I'm always willing to help. All right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Quite welcome.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for
Thank
sharing this
you.
with me tonight.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good night,
All right.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
the
Great, great,
Thank
great
you. Good
session,
night.
other
Mr.
tutors.
All right.
Very helpful.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Good
night,
night.
everyone.
Where I am, I'm in London. Good morning, because it's
Oh, good
1:12.
morning.
Um,
Wow. Wow.
yeah, it's definitely morning. It's 12 o'clock,
Mm.
right?
No, it's 1:12.
It's 1:12. Oh, 5 hours
Yes.
in front.
Wow.
Yep. We are.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
You're quite welcome. I didn't realize my
Bye-bye.
voice was reaching all the way to Europe tonight.
Oh, yes, it is, certainly. I stayed up to it. I really
Oh,
did.
beautiful. Thank you, Janice.
Mm, Thank you. All the
Yeah.
best.
Thank
See you
you.
on
We'll see you on
Thursday.
Thursday.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay.
Night, Mr. Joros.
Good night. Good night, my dear. Take care.
All
It was
right.
nice having you.
You too. Can't
All
wait
right.
for Thursday.
Yep. Thursday would be a little bit more interesting, I think.
Okay.
All right.